It's a very good question. So one of the first bills I worked on in Legislature was a bill with Representative Brady Walkinshaw, who's running for Congress right now, about, so it's one phase. So if somebody has overdosed on an opioid or heroin, who can administer the medication to fix it, Narcan. So I worked really hard with him on that, bipartisan. We presented the bill, even though it was his bill, I was number 2 on the bill. We presented it together to the Senate, and we got it passed. And what that did is it dealt with local shelters and those sort of things. So again, we're talking about a 3-phase. What are we going to do? Somebody that's in crisis, somebody that's already overdosed. Who are going to be able to administer it? We want to make sure that the relatives, family members, know that they should go to their doctor saying, I have a relative or a friend that has a propensity to use and abuse opioids. Make sure they have the Narcan, which is the medication I talked about before. Our local police officers now can carry Narcan if they choose to. It's very expensive. I mean, that's one thing that we have to work with the pharmaceuticals to get the price down. Then making sure first responders, meaning EMTs, not just paramedics, carry Narcan. And that works more for the bigger inner cities where they have very close response times, like Seattle, that sort of thing. Out in our system, the rural system, we're heavy paramedic dependent, so I don't know that it's really necessary for the EMTs in our area.
Just to clarify, paramedics always had the ability.
Yeah, we've on advanced life support, we've always had Narcan.
You had to be a paramedic. You couldn't be a basic EMT.
Yeah, exactly. But so we changed in the rules, kind of similar to what we did with epinephrine for those kids in school that have allergic reactions. So I think that's phase 1. We do that. Phase 2.
And is Narcan like methadone? Is that?
No, not at all. It is not. All it does is it blocks the receptor from accepting the opioid. It's got a short half-life, so we might have to redose, especially if somebody is a chronic abuser of heroin, those sort of things. So what it does is it just chemically or physically blocks the barrier, so the medication, the opioid, cannot get into the cell.
But it's a temporary.
It's temporary. So like I said, it's kind of a 3-phase approach to answer. It's a longer answer than
and something that would only be used in an overdose situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you arrive.
Suspected overdose. So you find somebody unconscious, somebody that's got track marks, all of the scars and sort of thing from injecting of opioids. You would give this medication, and you would stop the crisis that they're having right now. Now that doesn't fix the crisis that they're currently into, which is the addiction process. Number 2, that we have to understand that a lot of people abuse either alcohol or opioids because of an underlying mental health issue. So we have got to be way more robust in our intake of patients and offering of treatment. We have a new medication that you just mentioned. I can't remember the name of it now.
Methadone?
It's not methadone. So there's another medication that I support more than methadone. I apologize, I don't remember the name of it right now, but it is widely under study right now that I'm concerned that methadone it continues to give the reward centers in the brain that reward that you get from the opioid use.
So do people become addicted to methadone?
Basically, people become addicted to methadone, yes. And that is disappointing. So I'm not a supporter of the methadone treatment. That was a European model, and Europe has found that basically they just have a whole bunch of people that are addicted to methadone.
And the other prescription you're talking about acts differently.
It does. It's a new way of satisfying the reward centers in the brain, but doesn't give you the high and the terrible effects that you can get. So you can basically then hold a job and that sort of thing.
So what were you saying? You were saying the second.
So what I'm saying is the second phase that we have to do, one, we have strategies for when somebody's in crisis, when they have overdosed. We're going to have to be more robust about our social work intake now. Those people that ask us for help, we have to have resources. And the first resource we have, because I mentioned, are we dealing with a mental health issue, or are we dealing with somebody that has mental health problems because they're addicted? We have got to have them in a dry out situation. So I call that crisis intervention. So the first 7 days. That's the one service that we don't have a lot of here, is what are we going to do in the first 7 days? A lot of times fire service will find somebody in crisis and we'll take them to the emergency room. That gets them out of the crisis standpoint, but a lot of times the ER will then just release them back out on the street, and we'll find them 6 hours
It's kind
later.
of an interim step after you deal with the first crisis.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what are we going to do? So what we're going to have to do, I think we're going to have more mandatory treatment. So people that we see in the field over and over and over again, we're going to have to say you're going to have to go through treatment, because this is the tough part about it, and this is why fixing this problem is going to be a lot longer than just me explaining here in this room how to do it. If we force people to go through treatment, we only have about 20% effectiveness. People really have to hit rock bottom and decide that they want to be fixed. So a more robust intermediate, number 2 would be a more robust crisis intervention at that point in time. So what that would look like more is places we can take people that are overdosing or have a propensity to overdose to dry out. You have to be monitored medically when you're drying out. When you just go cold turkey off this, it is terrible. Now the good news about opioids, it's not like benzodiazepines and Valium and those sort of things, and alcohol. When you go off of it, you actually have a physical addiction to where you can have seizures and actually die if you don't have close monitoring. But a lot of the reasons people don't clean up is because it's so painful to clean up. So that first 7 days where we have some kind of clinical supervision, a slow tapering off of medication, I think is necessary so they don't feel the pain. Because when I interview people on the street, I just walk around and ask them, why don't you clean up? And they quite frankly say, I would like to, but it is too painful. I mean,
What you're describing sounds to me like a program that exists in the 2 counties that you cover.
Absolutely.
With Mason County and Kitsap passing a small sales tax from these triage centers and crisis intervention.
We don't have it off the ground yet, but
but is that kind of concept? Is that what you think?
Yes. So
what you're describing.
So it needs to be more than just opioids. It needs to be alcohol, and it needs to be cannabis. It needs to be all of it. That it needs to be kind of an open arms approach.
What's the third step?
So the third step is, again, we're going to have to get very tough on those that are, I don't want to go back into the old days of war on drugs, but we're going to have to get robust in our ability for local law enforcement to charge and prosecute those that are poisoning our kids and our citizens by making sure that we're not going to stop the trafficking, but what we need to do is make the trafficking so painful that you don't want to do that.
Okay, so how are you going to do that? And let me make a statement first. Singapore, my son lives in Singapore. He's been there for 10, 15 years. We've been there 4 times. Singapore does not have a drug problem. There's drug users there, but they are dealt with severely. And the legislature has got to be the body that passes the laws that make it prohibitive to use drugs, and we don't do that. We won't do that. Our society will not allow that to happen. True or false?
I believe with proper education and test beds, we can get by off on this. So a lot of times in the legislature, I'll bring up an idea, and the idea is shot down wholesalely. But I bring it up because I want people to start thinking about the idea. So I think to answer your question, the way that it becomes tolerable is we find small test beds. Maybe we do a test bed in a rural Mason County where we're up 300% on our heroin deaths and up 200% on our heroin calls. Maybe we do a small test bed and see that it works. So then we can get trust and buy-in. Because if we just wholesalely do it in the state of Washington, I agree with you, we're going to get people with lots of kickback. But we do small test beds, we find out what works, we do the tweaks, we work closely with law enforcement and give them the tools to kind of combat the problem and make the punishment pretty severe if you're
Now,
dealing drugs.
Are you talking just about dealers, traffickers,
I think we
or
have
users?
I think we have to go after we have to have the user, we have to have a plan, and that's plan 2, the step 2, where we have the crisis intervention capabilities. The dealers is where I think we have to go after the dealers. The same thing with human trafficking. We're going after the people that purchase. On this one, I don't think the people that purchase are the ones we can go after. We have to go after the people that are dealing in this terrible drug.
But it's a supply-demand issue.
It is.
Both sides have got to be attended to.
They do, and again, I don't find I have never found a junkie that would tell me point blank they didn't want to get off the stuff. I haven't found that. I know there are those people that don't want to get off of it, but I haven't found one that could stand up right now to my face and tell me, if I was given a treatment option that wasn't so painful that I thought I was going to die, they wouldn't at least
Sounds like
attempt
you
it.
talk to these people then.
I do, but I'm a professional firefighter. I talk to them when I'm transporting them. I am
Okay.
constantly doing the experiment on what is going to work, and I ask them. I mean, you got to ask the people that are using, and the people, and quite often we'll have to go take care of medically the people that are dealing it, and I ask them, what do we do about it? The dealers obviously don't want us to punish them, but they're going to have to be punished pretty severely.
Some drug abusers start with a doctor over prescribing.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
we've
And so,
changed.
You're saying that you will go after the doctors as well as the so-called drug dealer.
We have the reason that one of the reasons that you're seeing that the heroin epidemic has got to the point that it has got to is the legislature has cracked down heavily on prescribing opioids. Right now, most people, if you're over a month or over 4 months on a narcotic regimen, you have to go to a pain clinic. So again, we're fixing one of the problems, which is prescribing opioids, but now it's getting so expensive for them to get that medication and to get a constant supply of it. Now heroin has actually become very inexpensive. So we are experiencing right now a symptom of our success. And I'm not saying that we should lax on the prescribing. I do believe that a physician should be left to prescribe what they deem necessary. We shouldn't handcuff them too much, but we're doing good on that side. We just have, it's like a whack-a-mole. The next mole popped their evil head up, and we'll
And
have
that's when meth was taken care
Yeah.
of by getting that off.
well, yeah. When we
It's really cracked down on
Yeah.
creating meth.
we've totally reformulated our cold medications now to where the pseudoephedra is not in there any longer.
On the triage clinic question, let me go back to that one real quick. What are you looking for in these two, as Kitsap and Mason get going on those? What will you be looking for as kind of a result to help guide what the legislature should do as far as that second step that you were talking about?
Well, I think I don't know that the legislature. First
or
of
is that a
all,
local thing? Is it
I think
better
it's
handled?
more of a local thing, but what I work at as a cheerleader to make sure that the community is enthusiastically supportive of it, but also what are we going to do for some grants and funding measures to make sure they get the actual brick and mortar portion of it off the ground. There will probably be a capital budget request, and I will support that for construction of a facility in Mason County. Commissioner Terry Jeffries has taken this issue on, and she wants to tackle it fully. The biggest question is, is it mental health that we need help with, or do we need a robust combination of both? And I said, I don't think you can de-link mental health and substance abuse. You can't do it. So it has to be a clinic that has the ability, or an inpatient setting, whatever that looks like. It's an evolving thing, but I'm working with the locals to make
But
sure we get it
don't
off the
you
ground.
think, I mean, yeah, so you do this stuff for 7 days, and that's great, you get them past that.
Well, then they need to move into long-term treatment. But the problem is if you don't do the first 7 days where you dry out,
Get that?
you don't know if you have to send them down the mental health path for long-term treatment, or you have to send them down to long-term drug and alcohol addiction path. So the crisis point is, the reason this is such a tough nut to crack is you can't separate mental health and substance abuse. If you do, you're going to miss one or the other, and you're not going to fix the actual problem. So the 7 days really, to be honest with you, and I know we've gone into this quite a bit, it is to get somebody to a state where we could do the mental health evaluation and we could have accurate data
Do
to
we
make.
have the resources to do that?
I think we're building the resources at this point in time. Absolutely.
Called behavioral health for that reason.
Yes.
It's a dual diagnosis.
Yeah, and so that's one thing that we've worked on in Olympia, is to do a holistic approach, and we want to combine the idea that substance abuse and mental health are hand in hand. If we don't, we're gonna miss the reason for it.
Let me ask.
I love the Utah model. I really do. I think we need to borrow from it as much as possible. Steal if we have to. Because they're having success. For homelessness, we have the question of affordability. We have the question of, do we do rent control? Do we do these kind of things? And I'm not a big supporter of rent control. And I ask myself, because I'm not a supporter of rent control, what am I going to do to make sure there is affordability out there? So there are housing options available. I'm working hard with the city of Shelton right now on tiny houses. The city commission and the new city administrator support the idea on some of their tax foreclosed lots in the city, that we could put about 3 tiny homes per lot on a foundation. So they're now willable. They're now you can sell them and upgrade, but
It pass code.
it does pass code. They have the ability to change the size of structure. A lot of local administrators wanted us to pass a comprehensive bill in Olympia that allowed zoning for tiny homes. The Growth Management Act absolutely gives them the ability to zone the size of houses that are going to be built in.
So you're saying they don't really need that
They don't
legislation.
need the legislation, and so I've been working with the city commissioners of Shelton and the city commissioners in Mason County, and I'll work with all of them throughout, all the county commissioners that I work with and city commissioners. If we get it off the ground, and again, as I was telling you, I'd like to do things in test beds. So if we can get it working in Shelton, we can get a couple projects off the ground. I even have a financier that would underwrite the project, because they really want to see this project go.
Because private money is.
It's private money would come in. It wouldn't be.
Kind of development.
Yes, it would be more of a development status.
Like they would see it as a.
They would,
very small
and
housing note they're investing in.
yeah, and the good news about that is if we can get the developers that can make money, and we can also have affordability built in, I think it's kind of the holy grail. We don't have public money in there, the developers will build it. What we used to do years ago is we would build large mobile home parks. In a mobile home park, affordability is not a question. It is affordable. You know, we're down around $500 a month and that sort of thing, and they become kind of this pariah now that the communities don't want to see mobile home parks. So what do we evolve into to keep things in affordable status without telling the landlord exactly what they have to charge? So I think the way we do that is we build structures that will just generically stay in affordable status. I think a tiny home would be a hand up instead of a handout. We we don't know right now. It's kind of out in the open. We're still thinking about it. Are we gonna call? Is this gonna be a project that we get off the ground through Habitat for Humanity? Are we gonna try to do private development? Are we gonna have the financiers underwrite a public-private partnership? It's still too new. However, don't let, every time I see one of the city commissioners, I ask them, have we talked about the zoning changes we need to do? Because we have to have.
So that's what's holding that right now.
Yes,
They
we need to do some zoning changes. We got to identify the properties that we would like to zone. We would like to see stock plans, at least in the city of Shelton. So if it, we'd have 150 square foot, a 250 square foot, and say a 400 square foot tiny home that's been designed. We're talking about the possibility of doing build competitions, so all three of them on the property will go up at the same time, and then we'll do a competition with some of the local developers or contractors to make sure that we make this thing fun and then we get community buy-in.
So how do the developers think they'll make money on it, just out of curiosity?
So it's quick. It's quick money. So you can build a tiny home in 2 weekends. So you don't have to be. You don't have your crew there for 6 months. You're 3 houses, approximately $40,000 cost. Their cost will be a little less than that, so there will be some profit margin built in there. But it's quick turnaround. You can do these developments really quickly. We want to upscale it sometime to have a very large tiny home community. It's kind of akin to Shelton being a logging community, and they built houses and dragged them on skids and placed them there. I mean, it's kind of going logging camps. Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting about tiny homes are not necessarily only a thing for homeless people. We've
No.
got stories about people on Bainbridge Island building tiny homes just because it's preferred.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what we found on tiny homes is if you take the trailer out, you take all the steel and all the stuff that you have to put into a tiny home to make it able to travel down the road, you take a lot of the cost out. So if you bolt it to a foundation, now you have banks willing to loan on it because it's now not a mobile home. I have assurances from all of the credit unions in Shelton and major banks that they will loan on a house that is a fully self-supporting house. But we have to change the zoning, and some of the zoning we have to do is what does it cost? For hookups? So because 3 tiny homes would kind of equal 1 home, I'm trying to say that maybe we should change your hookup rules to say water and sewer will be per lot, so not per residence, because that way we can still keep that affordable, always in the back of our mind, affordability. I know people in Shelton that when we do the walk that are living in their car, they're getting housing allotment of about $700 a month, but we can't find right now with this booming economy. One of the terrible things about the booming economy is we can't find, or they're waiting in line for months at $700.
What is an average rent in Shelton?
So we do have affordable rent. We just don't have any open. There's from the mobile home parks to the trailer, we have nothing. I mean, there is something that I'm kind of excited about in Belfair that it's been in the news lately, but they're tearing down the old Glow Room tavern restaurant, and that's going to be, hopefully, if the property owner gets it off the ground, 52-bed apartment building, or 52 apartment building. The legislature passed about 4 years ago. I was not there, but they passed a zoning change to give encouragement to develop it. So developers that want to develop low-income housing and housing that would stay in low-income status, you would kind of get.
This is just in the Sun on the
yes,
big story.
Yeah, a tax credit.
Yeah,
So this is the first one. It's been 4 years, and we finally got a developer looking to do that.
This is private money,
This is private money as well. Yeah.
low income.
Yes. Like I said, the biggest way to get, to get private money, how is it profitable? And you asked a good question. Why would somebody invest in it? And again, when I'm talking to contractors that are thinking about it, I'm working with. They're telling me that, well, if I can get in, get out, that's actually very desirable. And there are contractors that could work on a lower margin, but a specialty margin. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing with homelessness.
And in the case of the Bremerton apartments in our story, actually, this didn't get in the story. The developer called the next day, and Tad's going to do kind of a recap on it. But because not all of them have to be low income,
Yeah.
if you do a percentage of them, the more expensive apartments are there's where
That's where they make their profits.
Coming
Yeah.
from, so it makes sense for them.
But I think it has to be, again, I keep talking robust, but it can't be just one solution or another solution. The one we're trying out, and I want to get off the ground, I hope we can get it off of the ground within a year in Shelton, is the tiny homes concept, but putting them on a foundation, taking the running gear out from underneath them.
No, but that's an interesting concept of your idea of testing something here
Yes.
that then could be used.
We could expand it because
It's very similar to the tent cities idea that test it in different places. This
Yeah.
is a different version of it with a little more.
yeah, what we have in Shelton is tent cities all over the place that are just not authorized tent cities. There's all kinds of problems that we get with that. Is how do you do waste disposal, because they don't. It's all over the property, and then we get at least one of them catch fire a year, and it's a major.
It feels like an evolution.
Yeah, issue.
It's
So
just like the jungle in Seattle.
it is. It is.
Well, if you can really make this affordable, I mean, it provides the individual a hell of a lot of things. An address, for example.
Yes.
I mean,
it's all of that stuff that we need to better ourselves. We need an address. We need a place that can have internet services. And right now, a lot of people don't know this, but Comcast will give you free Wi-Fi or $7.99 a month Wi-Fi if you have a child in your house that is free or reduced lunch. And I don't bring it up because I'm a big Comcast fan. What I'm saying is, if you're in a Comcast service area and you have a child in your home with free or reduced lunch, you can get broadband internet, very high-speed internet, for $7.99 a month. It kind of levels the playing field all around.
You're leading me right to my next question.
Well, I think the key, when you say should, the question is there an appetite for a fundamental overhaul of our taxation, tax structure in Washington State? And the answer is no. And we've asked several times. We've asked the voters, do you want to impose an income tax on yourself? Do you want a three-legged stool approach where you have income tax, property tax, and sales tax? And over and over and over again, the electorate says no. So how do we work under that? There are several studies that talk about the regressivity of sales tax. The one thing Washington State doesn't do is it does not tax food. So the idea that people have, and this is very popular among the electorate, the idea that people have the ability to determine if they pay tax or not is desirable to them. Because if I don't buy something big, I don't buy a car, I don't buy, I shop private party transfer on vehicles and that stuff. I really, except when I go license my vehicle, I don't have a lot of tax that I have to pay. And we don't pay for food. Some see it as an ability, is more regressive towards government and less regressive towards the citizen. But I don't think there is an appetite right now for a major overhaul in the tax structure in Washington State. It would have to be voted on by the people, because it's built into the Constitution that we do not have income tax.
Maybe I should ask you a different way. Are there any changes? Because I think that's the answer a lot of people would give is we haven't proven that. But are there any things you would like to see explored on?
I think we need to look at tying some local property taxes to cost of living. There's some of our local taxing districts are finding it hard to keep up at a 1%. So I think that is worth talking about in Olympia, and whether there's an appetite from the citizenry to accept that. But I think we at least have to look at it.
I mean, it would go higher than the 1%.
Yeah, so basically it would be a I think we're going to have to look at all of our local government
Just so they
entities
can-
are
so they can keep up.
begging for it. Now they would like to see 106% again, which that is unrealistic. 1% may be unrealistic, but something akin
Are we
to.
too dependent on levies? And you, from a firefighter background, you have to have an opinion on this because these agencies continue to need to ask.
Well, in the fire service, we have basic money that is always built in, the
Yeah.
$1.50 that's built in
Yeah.
for fire protection. We might need to talk about someday whether EMS is now fully integrated into the fire service and that EMS would be a guaranteed amount of money. I've been looking at the changing fire taxing districts to a senior junior taxing district status, so we would call it a different, call it something different, and that if we do that, then they would be way higher on the decision making list for pro rationing. So there, other taxing districts would be lower on the list if we had to do pro rationing, but maybe we move the fire districts up a little higher so they
So
wouldn't suffer from pro rationing as much.
like kind of coming up with a definition of what is essential
Yes.
and what is secondary to
Yes,
that is,
exactly.
well, that'd be a debate, huh?
It is a big debate, but it's something that we have to talk about.
Do you support an income tax?
I do not support an income tax in Washington State. It's unconstitutional right now. If the voters impose an income tax on themselves by initiative and that sort of thing, we'd have to figure out what to do about it. But it's not supported by the electorate. It's not desired, and I represent 137,500 people. That a majority of them, by quite a bit, every time we brought up an income tax, has rejected it wholesalely. So I will
Let me
not
use that
support
to
that.
my next question actually, because that's a good idea.
So I've been looking at the concept. I think it's one of the most desirable. It doesn't implement an income tax. It's for about 90% of our school districts out there. It's already a tax that the citizens have voted in every 2 years. So I think it's worth looking at, but the devil's in the detail. We got to figure out what it's going to look like. Are we going to give our schools the ability to levy any monies, for doing projects that they sell to the constituents that they want to do?
Would you want to still allow them that?
I think they would have to have an ability, a very small amount of money that they could levy locally. Maybe the local constituents of that school have something that they want to work on. They can go sell it to the local constituents and ask, do you want us to provide this service? But built into basic education, I think we need to be, we need to have way more robust vocational skills training. The way that our school model has changed, a lot of vocational skills are not taught in school any longer. I mean, I paid my way when I graduated, before I got hired as a firefighter, through the welding skills I learned in high school. I love the idea of the skill centers, but I think we need to move our kiddos from, say 8th grade, where they get their first experience in some of the vocations, to 9th and 10th grade that they have on-site school training. But then when they move to the vocational skills training at the skill centers, let's talk about actual certifications they're going to receive, to where as soon as they graduate, I'm now a certified welder. I can go work for Safe Boats. I can go work for the shipyard, those sort of things.
I'd like to ask you more about this, the swap that you were talking about, the levy swap. So that's putting on more of the burden on the state, which is, which everybody's talking about. How are you going to fund that?
So it's right now, the concept with levy swap is the current levies that the locals are already collecting. Now, in my district, we would see the levy rate go down considerably, and with the current concept, you would see more of the Metro King County you would see theirs go up slightly.
People in Seattle and Bellevue then pay more to the state.
They
and
would
it
pay,
gets distributed out.
and it would be distributed out.
Instead of they keep their own levy money.
Yeah,
they tax
and
on it.
the,
So it'd be the same tax is what you're
It's a
saying?
basically it is what we're already collecting locally. It would just be the state collecting it. Now, the premise behind McCleary decision is that there's an over-reliance on local levies to provide for basic
Yeah,
education.
right,
So
right.
one way to get out of the contempt of court is make that make that question go away. That doesn't answer all of the questions about reduced class size and those sort of things, which I think the McCleary work group is working on all three of those right now. I mean, we have a work group right now that's
Right.
what they're doing. I'm very optimistic that bipartisan group is going to come up with a solution that will get us out of contempt of court and put us on a sustainable path in the future. I think it's important to say that, and to point out, we put a heck of a lot of funding into basic education and teacher pay over the last 2 years. I mean, it was a huge step. McCleary decision was, almost 10 years ago now, and in 2 years we made up almost a third of what the Supreme Court says we're behind. So we're making really good progress. I think it's kind of curious that the governor is even taking that as a big, feather in his cap. But look at what we had got done. So even the governor says that we've made huge progress, and I think we're going to continue to make progress. Now,
one of the ideas that comes up often is the idea of an education first budget. So
Yeah.
Is that something you'd be in favor of?
yeah. So if our Constitution says it's paramount duty, it is. So it should be first funded. Now, there's a lot of good reasons why it should be first funded, and we should fund it very early because the school districts right now have to make staffing decisions. And a lot of times we're not out of session before the staffing decisions have to be made. So if it is indeed the paramount duty of the citizens of the state of Washington to fund education amply, we should fund it like that. So it should be funded first. And for many reasons, and one of them that I just pointed out is the schools really have to be able to make their staffing decisions earlier than we're allowing them to do because of how long sessions go, especially the long session the first year.
Okay, my turn.
Absolutely.
Bill Keim, K-E-I-M, is the executive director of Washington Association of School Administrators. And the Shelton paper wrote this article. And the point I want to bring up is that Dorn, the superintendent, has now sued 7 different school districts.
Yes.
Okay, and the premise behind that is that levy money, well, first of all, the largest single expense in the school system is teacher salaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so what these districts, and probably many others, have been doing is using levy money to pay teacher salaries. And so, like you say, there's nearly $30 million in fines now for not solving this problem of getting education fully funded. So what is going, and the other fact that he mentions here is that since 1987, the percent of salaries funded by the state, not the levies, but by the state, has declined from 99 to 77% because the levies, they're using the levy money to make up the difference. And he's saying you can't do that. So how do we stop doing that? And so I turned to my wife last night and I said, let me ask you a question. If we're having a levy here in Grapefield for education, and you know that most of that money is going to go for teacher salaries rather than for the kids, for the classroom size, for whatever else you want to say, are you going to vote for that levy? And this is exactly the concern that he's bringing up. How do we solve that problem?
Well, so first of all, the biggest concern under the lawsuit that Randy Dorn has brought up is the use of local levy dollars for tri-pay. So tri-pay is a way that local jurisdictions can increase the salaries and make their school district more appealing.
For time, responsibilities, or incentives?
Yes, that's tri-pay, yeah. So basic levies can supplement teacher salaries for basic local reasons. So be it shop class, be it the specialties that schools want to do, be it computer education, that sort of thing. But if we get back to the premise behind the underlying McCleary decision, we have an over-reliance on local levies. The idea behind levy swap is it would not be a local levy any longer, thus be constitutional, it'd be constitutional funding method for schools.
Now.
It is not. This would change it to that if that is the solution that we adopt. I think it's the quickest solution, and it's a solution that we must look at.
We've been looking at it for 3 years. The legislature has not come up with a solution to fully fund education, $30 million worth of fines.
So, yes, we have put $5 billion in the last 2 years into education through the growing of the economy. So that's new money. If we couple the new money with levy reform like I'm talking about, we will comply with the McCleary decision, and we will get the Supreme Court off our back.
Well,
And essentially,
$5 to $8 billion in shortfall.
So there's
to fully fund education.
It's about $4 billion if you don't add tri-pay. So the tri-pay reform is going to have to be something we talk about right now, because this is the biggest problem. Mason County, Kitsap County, and Thurston County, we're losing teachers to those school districts that have the ability, and those are basically the 7 school districts that he's suing. They're taking teachers because they have an ability to pay a huge amount of tri-days.
And these school districts cannot afford to keep the teachers.
They can. So we are going to have to reform teacher pay if we're going to continue in our current teacher shortage to continue to keep high quality teachers. Yes, it's going to have to.
And then deal with, and that would solve his point about, in other words, now the state would be paying the vast majority of the teacher's salary.
Basically, we would be paying all of it. This is one thing that is problematic. Who do they negotiate with? The teachers negotiate with the legislature, and they negotiate with the local schools. I think we need to get it to the teachers negotiate one place. Either we write a check large enough for them to competitively negotiate locally.
So are you going to tell the WEA what to do?
We're going to have to do one or the other. Yes,
That's
absolutely.
right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I mean, leadership. We have to lead, and at this point in time, we have to identify. We need to come up with a structure that maintains highly qualified teachers in the rural districts, which all of my district is rural. So how are we going to keep those teachers? We're going to have to, but again, we're going to have to negotiate one place or the other. Either they negotiate locally through dollars that we give, or we come up with a funding model.
Why can't you tell them where they're going to negotiate?
And I think we're going to tell them that they're going to be. I don't know what it's going to work out. I believe it'll work out that there'll be more state employees and less local employees as far as their wages are concerned and their benefits are concerned.
It's a big issue.
It's a huge issue. It's not an easy issue, but it's something that's worth tackling and putting a lot of time and effort into tackling. But again, I understand we haven't done it. In the 2 years that I've been in the legislature, we put nearly $5 billion basically in new funding in K-12 education, and raised teacher pay considerably, and worked on how are we going to keep the good teachers that we currently have in the profession, and how are we going to recruit new teachers into the profession. We put a lot.
You and the economy has done it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, but you're also talking about things like this vocational training. Again, it seems to me that some of these things are going to cost additional money. It's not just gonna, come out of the air. Are you thinking that's gonna be done locally? Or is it gonna be done by the state?
We put a considerable amount of money in school construction funding pot dedicated to the vocations. So you're kind of higher on the list if you're bringing back into your school district a vocational skill. The reason that we have to put more focus and emphasis on vocations is your pathway to $100,000 a year salary is about 10 times quicker now in what I call the mechanic skills. That would be nursing, that would be actual mechanic, that'd be welding. I mean, the discipline that we are losing at an alarming rate, people are willing to pay a lot of money for. So because, I mean, I'll use Boeing as an example. Right now all you need is a GED or diploma, and within 4 years of employment, you will be, their contract guarantees them $100,000 a year. They just want, this is the other hard part, if we're talking about school reform, they need people to show up to work on time. They need people that not so much, you know, the excess tardyism and people that are willing to do it the Boeing way. You know, so somebody that's willing to be told how to do it the Boeing way, and what the Boeing company and Microsoft and all these companies are telling me, it's getting harder and harder in Washington State to find. So when we're talking about reforms, we're going to have to talk about, right now, I'll regress a little bit. I managed a gas station in Allen at 16 years old. I ran it. On the weekends, it was my deal. We have changed child labor laws to the point where, I think it was a good thought process. We want them to really concentrate on their study skills and their study at school and everything like that. But we're missing the fact that the soft and hard skills that you must have to be a good, valuable employee to a business, we're not teaching any longer. Basically, we're saying we're going to shelter you till you become 18. When you become 18, boy, you're blessed now. You're now an adult. Don't make any bad decisions.
And in fact, nobody starts at the bottom.
Exactly. So at this point in time, we're going to have to start saying that we're going to have to do some pre-apprenticeships. We're going to have to get some work experience through an inside-out process through school. We're going to have to really shake up what this vocational training looks like, because that's where the best income is. Now, that's not to say that we're not, if you want to go be a scientist and study brain tumors, we want you to get there, absolutely. And how are we going to get you there? We want to give you those opportunities. But it's kind of alarming to me, and almost 70% of my district's kids won't go to college.
Now, some of that, it's been studied, a lot of that starts in very young ages, early childhood brain development and things like that. How clearly you feel very strongly about adding that vocational aspect into.
Yeah.
How strongly do you feel about things like pre-kindergarten and all-day kindergarten? Should those be something that's considered by the state as you guys sort of...
So all-day kindergarten's funded, it's just not off the ground yet in all schools. So that's off the table. We're going to do it. And we just got to get it done quickly. I do like voluntary reaching out in the community to pre-kindergarten education. North Mason is working on a really exciting program where they're going to the Theller building, where I actually went to school as a kid in 4th and 5th and 6th grades, is now going to be an educational building again, and they're going to offer that early childhood education. They figure they have 98 parents and students that right now would fit and qualify into that. It's voluntary, whether you're there helping. The concept is still not totally off the ground, but it's going to be really soon.
Is it private?
It's not private. North Mason School District is running it. So whether you want your kids to go there and be an all-day, where I don't want to say daycare, but kind of a daycare-like, but you get the education at the same time, or aggressive parent participation. You could bring them there 1 day a week. You can bring them there 5 days a week. But one of the things I think we have to do is we have to make sure our parents have a lot of tools in their toolbox how they educate at home. And I think with these experiences that they have at the North Mason School District is going to do is going to give them a lot of tools to where they can really work, because it's important for it to be at home as much as it is in a school setting.
Well, and the concept calls for some parenting classes and some adult education. I think that's a really good idea.
It's great.
Incorporate that in the same building.
So when you start out with the premise it's voluntary, I think you're going to have a lot more participation, because it's not a big program that you're kind of forcing down the throat of everyone. And in Washington State, we've been talking early childhood education for a long time. Kind of either a mandatory or it looked really negative that the school would be doing an outreach and come looking at your house and that sort of thing. And I think this is kind of a pulling the reins back a little bit and kind of a hybrid approach.
Who's gonna pay for it?
So it's already funded.
Do the parents need to pay?
No, it's already in, the biggest thing that North Basin's looking for, and we believe in our school construction grant we can get it, the kind of the rehab of the building. There's some minor mechanical issues that have to be fixed and some structural issues that have to be fixed, but there's already money for it in the Early Childhood Education Act, so we're
getting close.
I don't support the carbon tax at all.
Okay,
We're too over-reliant right now on gas taxes, and it's going to basically be another gas tax until we figure out our construction, which I have an idea on how we're going to do more highway construction within current revenue sources. I do not support that.
okay, thanks.
Tell us this, lead in with this on this.
Yeah, tell us what that is.
So what is? Oh, the idea?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
The highway construction.
Right now, every 2 years, we write a capital budget, and in that capital budget, we do about $1.3 billion of land acquisition. This is where we're buying land and turn it into parks. We do not do a very good job managing those. We do not budget to maintain those. And in a capital budget, the idea behind a capital budget is to build things. So at that kind of money, we will be able to do huge infrastructure rehabilitation programs, and it would fit under the concept of a capital budget. So building things.
Like
the Belfair bypass could easily be built with that, and I'm going to bring
So
that.
what are you saying, taking money away from parks to?
No, it's not taking any money away from parks. We're actually buying about $1.3 billion worth of new parks a year.
That was reformed some last year.
We
with
did
the
do.
WWRP.
Yeah, we
right?
did.
They kind of changed the weighting of it, so it favors
Yes, they did, but we.
projects rather than acquisitions.
I believe that if we did every other year.
Oh, okay.
So not every other year, but every other biennium, have a fixed focus on
Like
infrastructure.
No acquisition of this.
We don't need to do acquisition
Excellent.
because I keep asking WWRP and those land trust managers, shouldn't we be asking for maintenance money of these lands, because we don't have enough money to maintain all the lands. Now, some of the local land trusts work very aggressively and with the local adjacent landowners to give them incentives to be the person that maintains this stretch of creek or this stretch of prairie or something like that.
Why are they buying this land? What's it for?
Well, so some of it is sensitive land that needs to be taken. That there's a belief needs to be take the human element out, because the humans are now polluting the environment because this land is developed. It's preserving land. So some of it is salmon habitat preservation. Some of that is down Bayshore Golf Course. They're concerned that all of the fertilization and all that kind of stuff, the golf course is probably in a bad spot, so there's high nitrate content levels in Oakland Bay. They bought it, it's gone. That's part of the WWRP, yeah.
And it just sits there.
And it just sits there, and I don't agree with that policy. I think we need to do a better job if we're going to do these land purchases.
Or gamble, I guess that's.
No, there's good and bad examples of both. We have
Yeah.
if you don't mind waiting just a few weeks, we have a really fascinating story coming out on this.
Yeah, no.
A reporter who's looked into it. The state owns some absolutely jaw-dropping places, absolutely beautiful shorelines.
Yes.
That no one knows about, no one knows how to use them, there's no place to park.
Yeah.
And you could see on one hand, it'd be a great park, it'd be an economic driver if you could put some money into it, but their backlog is $500 million.
So-
work that needs to be done.
so
So
the
how
i-
do you balance those?
The idea is
That's
we
a good question.
continue to buy land like it's going out of style, but we do nothing to make sure that the people that paid for it gets to have adequate access to it.
Or even, I think, now we're getting.
I know we're getting sideways,
No,
but
no, but
but it's a good conversation.
It is, and this is why this story's so interesting. There's also this question of no one's rating these things. You know, the WRP program had a really good rating system.
Yeah.
It was very rigorous on what they do. But now you have all this stockpile, there's no one going, this one's great for a park, this one we don't need. This-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just no one's even looking
So,
at that.
so Parks does that a little bit. I mean, you know, they do kind of score what they would like to see. They think, you know, there's a lot of rumors that the Feller
Oh,
trust land would be
Yeah,
a Washington State Park eventually,
yeah.
and it would be under a land acquisition.
Yeah, but they're actually, I mean, Washington State Parks has been giving parks back because they don't have, I know they've done that on Bainbridge, for example, because they don't have the money
No,
to
that
maintain
Bay
it.
Neighbors was one of these.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That was one
and
of
so,
them, yeah.
but we just built a brand new park on Heartseat Island. I mean, so the idea really is here is, do we need to do expansion, or do we need to figure out maybe a little bit of contraction and figure out how we can get the lands that are really owned by the citizens of the state of Washington? How do we get them access to those lands? You bought it, you know, how are we gonna fund it? Is it gonna be a park? Is it gonna be an improved park, unimproved park? There's all kinds of things with trail riders and stuff like that, that we work aggressively with to make sure that those lands are maintained, and now they get some credit. Maybe you have more access to the park if you work on it. So we have to work harder with our local partners and local users of the parklands to see if they
And
want
Port
to.
Gamble's a great example.
It is
Yeah, it is.
it's a
That's
very
a
good
really
example.
of that.
You know, the Sand Hill recreational area is another example
Yeah.
that most of the cleanup of those parks are the clubs that actually recreate there.
absolutely.
It
So
becomes an economic draw.
it does, and
Tourism, yeah.
losing that would be very terrible. It would be
It doesn't
terrible. for
necessarily mean, though, that the state has to own all of them. I mean, I agree with you there.
No.
Because a lot of times they're really loved by the local communities, and so they want to protect them in some way.
And there is no reason why we couldn't have local communities get together, band together, and take over operation of it. I mean, we have to look at all options out there instead of this huge land acquisitions that we're doing. Maybe we back off of them. Maybe the land acquisitions are every other biennium, those kind of things. But
Does
you
the
know,
legislature vote that money to the land?
we do. I almost voted against the capital budget this last time because I didn't like some of the spending projects that were in there, but there was a lot of good that came out of it, and I was able to get a veterans homeless shelter in the last capital budget. So when I was asking for something for my community, I felt, you know, I had to support the concept. I work really hard. I never stop in this position. I'm a bulldog for the citizens of the 35th District. I serve on the local government committee, and you've heard me say it in the past. I think growth management is too burdensome, and the requirements injure the rural communities. We need to have local ability to make changes in our zoning, and with some immunity that is given to us. So a lot of times our locally electeds have the ability to do zoning changes for economic development, for schools, for that thing, but they're risk averse because they know they're going to have a lawsuit if they change their zoning. We need to have a better ability to manage our own destinies economically. And I'm going to continue to work on that. That's why I asked to be put on the local government committee. I'm on the public safety committee, and it's turning out to be one of my favorite committees because there is a group of people out there that are being victimized every day that I would like to fix as much as we can. I don't think I can fix the problem completely, but those that commit sex crimes and those that have been victims of sex crimes. I worked really hard on a bill that I got out of committee to remove the statute of limitations on sex crimes, And I think it's time with DNA and with all of the new tools that we have. I think Washington State should be a place where if you commit one of these horrible crimes, you should worry about conviction your entire natural life. I'm working heavily on getting the rape kit backlog tested. We worked on some landmark legislation to make that happen. Other states that have done that have been able to identify serial rapists, and I think we need to keep those people off the streets. And if we test these rape kits and we are able to find people and make convictions in closed cases, what it does is it gives some healing capability, healing to the people that were victims of those crimes.
So was it Seattle where they had all these rape kits that never had been?
That's why Amy Clancy and she interviewed me on it, because this is a big deal. It's kind of funny for me. I didn't think this was going to be something I worked on, but I absolutely passionately have gone this direction to work on the victims of sex crimes. But the question in Seattle is they are charging under municipal code, and it doesn't match up to Washington State code. So those that are convicted of gross misdemeanors in Washington State, certain gross misdemeanors, sexual contact with a minor, spousal abuse, those kind of things. There's like 7 of them. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but those right now we collect DNA. It's mandatory as soon as post-conviction. So it's not like your constitutional protections of due process suffer here. Post-conviction, you're going to take a DNA swab. Well, Seattle's charging under a different code than we're charging, than we wrote the law. So they're collecting it because that's the offenses are the same, but they're not processing it. And simple solution is that most municipal code cities engage into is they refer back to the RCW, so Washington State law, so they know then the prosecutor and the crime lab knows that they can test these samples. Right now, the Seattle prosecutor says that he can't charge under RCW. Our staff actually says that they can, and they can change their code. So myself and Representative Tina Orwell, Democrat from the Federal Way area, Fife area, Des Moines, sorry. She and I are working hard to make sure that we fix this however we fix it. So if there has to be a state fix, which we don't believe there has to be, we just believe that the prosecutor has to start charging the crime under state code. But if the Attorney General says that doesn't fix the problem, we will come up with a fix that municipal code cities will then be required to test the DNA sample of all of those.
Unfortunately, people. Seattle is not like most other cities.
They do tend to do things quite a bit differently than other cities.
That's a kind statement.
Yes. Well, and I try to be kind as much as I can. And then the last is I serve on the Education Committee, and I'm looking for smart reforms that can empower students and teachers. Right now, I'd like to point out that we have in the 35th District the Washington Youth Academy, which is our only at-risk youth outreach in the state of Washington. I want to expand that. The reason that I want to expand it is they have about a 90% success ratio, or in some classes a lot higher. But they can rehab 8 credits in 6 months, which is smoking fast in comparison to what our local schools can do. And I asked one of the instructors how that is. And the instructor said, well, ask your local teachers how many minutes of instruction time they can get in 60. Because I'll tell you, my answer is 55 in 60 minutes. And when you talk in most of our teachers, they'd be happy at 40 minutes of instruction in 60 minutes. So we have to give our teachers an ability to be classroom managers.
Would you reduce the amount of testing then?
Oh, absolutely. I'm done with the state standardized testing. We do nothing with the data we collect. We need to make sure that we align our curriculums and our testing locally. So our weekly, monthly, and chapter quizzes need to be aligned with state curriculum, and that way we can test performance and then instantly have response to any deficiencies that we have. Because right now we found out we did the new SBAC test. They were supposed to have, within a week before school was out, they were supposed to have the data, and that was 3-4 months before they got the data. It was did not turn out like the vendor said it was going to turn out. And I would end those testing and make sure that we had robust testing on our monthly, weekly, chapter quizzes, and
Just
have,
the regular testing that
yes,
the teacher does.
and have data collecting capability that we can put analytics into that data to say, okay, Johnny's missing comprehension, so we're gonna do some remediation here, or that Johnny's doing really good in mathematics. We need to challenge a little more. We have that because of the online public schools in Washington State. It's really neat. You can fractionally educate now, and that you can put a kid now into a more advanced class or a remedial class. We just need to make sure that we tie all those loose ends together so they get that support. But I think relying on local testing with instant data is way smarter than these huge high-stakes standardized testing that we're doing at this point in time.
Well, Dan, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
I appreciate it once again.